Hey, and welcome to this video about our new Kontakt framework called Evergreen that we've been developing over the past year almost, based on loads of your feedback, your comments and your DMs and your emails that you send us about what you'd love to see in future libraries. So this framework we've been developing is going to be used for all of our new upcoming orchestral and acoustic based sample libraries. First one being electric home piano, which I hope you've seen already. And it's a framework that's it's going to be a universal home for all of those styles of instruments, but one that can adapt to pretty much anything. So like pianos and drum kits and strings and all those kind of things. There's absolutely loads going on underneath to kind of make all those things work and sound absolutely amazing. But the front end, the bit that you use, is going to be really universal to all of them. There'll be some changes between libraries depending on exactly what it is, some controls that are specific to those libraries. But on the whole, moving from one library to another is going to be like this really seamless experience. So this video is going to just take you through the whole interface so you got a real idea about what it's going to do. I know a lot of you don't read instruction manuals, so that's what this video is there for, is basically to kind of like show you around, show you some tips and tricks. There's also a feature in there that's been our #1 requested feature that I'll talk about later, so stick around for that. But apart from that, hopefully you'll get kind of a few tips and tricks out of this video and see exactly what this thing's capable of. Across the top, you've got all your sound selector switches here. If there's going to be more, then you'll be able to flip between different pages up the top there. And basically, you can just select any of these and start playing with them immediately. If you hold down Shift, you can select multiple versions of these. So you can select all of them if you really want to. Up to you, whatever you want to do. If you've made a mistake and you want to just unselect some of these, keep on holding down Shift and you can untick them. Really, really, really simple. You'll also get a text confirmation across here as well. So when you're flipping between pages, you still know exactly what sound is loaded up. The snapshots are at the top. With each of these Evergreen libraries, we're going to create some snapshots that you can use on the home piano. You've got 40 to choose from, and they're all just available at the top. You need to click this camera icon if they're not there immediately, or if you're using like an NKS keyboard hardware, then you can load them up through there. If you created your own one and you love it, again, you can just save it. So let's just create something here. Really like this sound. And then you can just hit the little save icon up here, call it whatever you want, and then you can recall it on another project for another time. I know there's loads of times where I've created stuff and you need to save this stuff because you'll never get it back again. Across the bottom, you've got all these faders, and this is really going to change on each instrument. So this is one thing you're going to have to explore or actually read the instruction manual about. How about that? But basically, the normal options will be expression and dynamics, which are mapped naturally to a MIDI fader, which is CC11, and your mod wheel CC1. But you can change those as well. So if you're not really happy with those, I've got an external MIDI controller down here. You can remove that one and then hit right click again. Learn MIDI CC, choose another fader on your interface on your hardware, and you can map it to a completely different one. And that's the same with absolutely any control on the interface as well. So if you wanted this control here to be, on a slider or a knob on your hardware, then basically right click it, learn MIDI CC, and then move that fader or that knob or whatever you want to control it with. And then you can control it externally rather than having to use your mouse on the wheel. A lot of the times it's nice to just be able to play and, use two hands at once to kind of like do this stuff. So that's the idea behind that. If you want to reset any control on the interface, hit Command and then left click on it. On a Windows machine, it's the Windows key and left click, and that will kind of like reset it to default. So you can do that with absolutely any of these controls on the interface, like reverb and all those kind of things. If you just want to get it back to how we set it up, that's what you can do. Across here, you've got the microphone selectors or signals, I would say, where you've got like different microphone options. Again, on each library, you're going to have different, multiple options of these. Some you might only see 4 microphones, others you might see way more than that. And then you've got these options here to flip between different microphone sources. At the top here, you've got some power switches. So if you didn't want a particular mic, you don't like that signal, you can just turn it off. And what that does is purges those samples from memory as well. So it stops using the samples in your RAM and then makes the the resources on your computer much better as well. So if you didn't like a particular sound, I would just get rid of it rather than just turning it down. You can do that. You've also got a pan option here to pan the microphones left and right. The way they're naturally panned at just default is exactly how we recorded those and kind of like how we expect to use them. But you can push the sound around for creative purposes or to fit in with other instruments, whatever you want to do. The faders here are just exactly as you'd expect them. In the default position, that's just exactly where we've leveled them to. You can push them all the way up to 6 dB higher than we've recorded them, or kind of all the way down as well. Now across the bottom here, you've got solo and mute switches for each of the channel as well, which are fairly self-explanatory. If you just want to just stop a channel from working for an instance, you can just mute it, and then you can just solo channels as well. And these just work on a left click, so you can just click them, and now you've just got those 3 channels selected. If you wanted to absolutely solo a channel and get rid of everything else, if you hold down Shift on your keyboard and hit left click, then that will just solo that channel and get rid of everything else as well. So if you just wanted to isolate a channel, then that's a really good tip there. You can scroll through the microphone positions here as well. If there's more than 4, then we've got them on different pages, so you can see what's available there. And then you've got some save and loading options as well. So if you've made an absolutely amazing mix, let's just make something here that you want to use on maybe a different session. So say you've made something in a project and you're like, I'm going to start a new project and I want to carry that over to a new project. Let's just create something here, hit save. Let's call it something like my awesome mix. I'm not that good at mixing, so it wouldn't be awesome, but you get the idea. Then you've got it saved, and then say you move them around again. Let's load up that awesome mix that I made the other day. My awesome mix, open it, and then that will set all those faders back to exactly how you created them to begin with. It's really good that, because there's so many times where you have made a mix and you're just like, oh, I can't get it exactly the way I had it in that other session. It just saves all that messing around. So let's take a bit of a deeper dive now into the articulation switches. So if you select any of these, what you'll see is a little edit window that comes up along the top. So if you hit that, this nice little panel comes up where you can change some of the things about that articulation, that specific sound. And this is going to, again, change depending on which sound, because not all these options are going to be relevant to some of the sounds. But these are completely independent of each one. So one of the request that we got was, I'd like to be able to edit the sounds, but like each one separately. So that's what we've managed to do. So what you'll see is an orange window come up on the sound selector switch, and that's the one that you're editing. So even though you might have more than one sound selected, when you edit it, it's only editing that sound, and that's what the orange window is there to do. So you can change how the dynamics are controlled. You've got 2 options, velocity and mod wheel. So velocity is the obvious one. The harder you hit your keyboard, the louder the dynamic sound will get. Or the other option's mod wheel, which is basically, your mod wheel on your keyboard, CC1. And that's, if you've got your mod wheel all at the bottom, no matter how hard you hit your keyboard, you're still going to get soft sounds. Whereas if you raise it right up to the top, you're always going to get loud sounds. So it's down to you how you want to control those dynamics. In the middle here, you've got some sound options. So some of these will be really familiar to you: attack and release. So if I use one of these sounds here, you've got the attack, how quickly it takes to rise up to full volume, and the release of it as well, how quickly the sound dies away when you've finished. You've got a tightness control, which is more to do with the shorter articulations, and this basically cuts into the middle of the sound. So if you wanted to create a bit more of an immediate attack, it loses some of the realism because you don't get all of that information that happens just at the point of the transient happening. But if you wanted to really, really dive in to the front of the sample, that's what that tightness control is for. And then you've got an overall level control as well. So if you just want to balance 2 different sounds against each other, we balance the sounds out to a natural sort of like dynamic level anyway before the instrument gets to you. But if you wanted to change that, you can as well. Then across this side, you've got the round robin options, and you've got 3 different settings here. The first one is like how many round robins there are, and this is going to change depending on what sound you've got, obviously. On this sound here, the muted tone bars, we've got 5 round robins. So you can choose all of them if you want. They're naturally all loaded up to have all the round robins open, but if you wanted to turn them off, you can do. And what you can either do is just turn one off, or you can turn several off. If you didn't like a particular round robin, you can just turn it off. And then what you'll also get is a little indicator underneath the round robin that's currently being triggered. So you will have a real good idea about exactly which sample's being triggered. So the tip here is basically to choose a number of round robins that's not the same as your time signature. So if you're using like a 4/4 time signature, then use 5 or 3 or 1. That's the kind of the idea behind it. If you're using maybe like a 3/4 time signature, use 5 or 4 or 2. Don't use one that's like a multiple of your time signature. But you'll see there that they just randomly go between all of the different round robins. You've also got this reset on transport option, where every time you hit stop on your DAW, it will reset to the beginning, and this is more to do with this cycling option. So cycle will just go through the round robins in order, so 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 if we've got that many, you know, and just keep on looping through all those options. Random will just be completely random. It'll just pick one completely at random. So that's how you edit those sounds. You can just close the window down there, but like I say, that the options there are unique to each one of the sound sources. So if you're editing one, expect it just to happen on that sound source, which is really good because it means you're not affecting the other sounds that you might have already loaded up into that patch. On this effects page, this is kind of like the default that you'll see on all of the instruments. On a couple of them, there might be some other effects there, you know, relevant to the instrument, but this is kind of like the minimum that you'll see. So this Transpitch control is something I'm really, really proud that we've got this to work as well as it does. And it's something I've been doing on all of my samples for ages, which is basically pitch shifting stuff down, but then transposing it back up so you get the same key center. What normally you have to do is kind of pitch shift it up here, down in the interface, and then you've got to figure out how to transpose it, which you can do in the MIDI information, or you can do it kind of like with a plugin or those kind of things. But I always end up just like, that's too much of a mess for me. I just want one click to be able to do this. So this option here is what that can do. So each one of these is a 2 semitone increment, which will pitch shift. So if we click on 6, that will pitch shift everything down 6 semitones, but then transpose it back up 6 semitones. So middle C is still middle C, but you're getting the effect of samples that have been pitch shifted 6 semitones down. So it's really, really cool to play with. It sounds different on every single sound source. So some sounds will take on this effect in a much, much stronger way than others. Some won't respond to it as well as others. On things like pianos and strings and those kind of things, it works really, really well. So just experiment to see what you like. The thing that just to bear in mind with the Transpitch control is for every 2 semitone increment, you lose those off the top because they're not there anymore. You've transposed them and you've pitch shifted them around. So what you'll see on the Kontakt keyboard is those keys lost. So if you turn it off, you've got the full range up to that E up there. If I take it down up here, 12 semitones, you've lost the top octave off the keyboard because those aren't there anymore. They've been pitch shifted and transposed around. So that's just something to bear in mind if you're using that control. EQ, I'm not going to talk about too much. It's an EQ. You know what that does. If you just want to move it, cut or boost sounds, that's exactly what you can do with that control, just to make it really quick and simple, just to push stuff around. Saves you having to load up a plugin, basically. If you just want to make it a bit brighter or darker, you can do it. Onto the delay down here, and you've got loads of options, all the way from kind of like a digital clean sort of like delay, really pristine, doesn't color the sound at all. These 3 in the middle, analog, tape and vintage, which will start to really put some characteristics into the delayed signal, much more like a, you know, traditional tape delay and things like that would. And then you've got the haze option down here, which is much more of like a reverb than it is delay. It kind of like really pushes that boundary. The presets here will just give you some immediate starting points. So like beginning is basically what you'd expect a delay to sound like. Really simple, really, you know, nothing too crazy going on there. To these different ones here. So you can start to hear the delayed signal is much more modulated. And then all the way up to these ones, shoreline. is using this haze option, which is definitely, yeah, it's more of a reverb than it is delay, but experiment with what all these sound like. The mix is basically, you know, how much of that wet delayed signal do you want in there. You've also got this beat option here. If you turn that off, you've just got time-based delay. So there's like 1.2 seconds all the way down to, you know, absolute milliseconds. Or if you hit it, then this will synchronize to your DAW. So if you're maybe working at like 100 beats per minute or whatever, this will synchronize the delays to that tempo. And you've got options for whole beats, or you've got options for triplets when it says TR, or you've got options for dotted notes as well when it says DT. So you've got all those different synchronization options, which is really, really good. So the width control next, it's basically a stereo widener or a mono effect, and it basically pushes the sound out towards the side. So if you click it here, oh, by the way, if you click any control, it will turn on automatically, saves an extra button push. And if you take it back to default, it will also turn it off again as well. That was a really cool effect, idea that somebody suggested in the team, is let's just push that forward, and then it saves you having to remember to turn it on, kind of thing. Anyway, so width, you push it up, and what you'll get is the effect of the sound kind of like being pushed further out into the stereo field. My only sort of comment with this is just be careful how it collapses down to mono. If you're one of those people who likes to test their mixes in mono for like phones, and just mixes that sound good in mono sound good in stereo, so it's always a good idea to do that. But just be careful that when you do use stereo width plugins, that pushing stuff out towards the edges can often make it disappear in the middle. So just something to bear in mind. If you pull this all the way down to the middle, you'll get a completely mono sound. So that is the sound exactly the same in both left and right speakers. The reverb happens after this. So if you're adding reverb afterwards, you're suddenly going to make it stereo again. So that's something to bear in mind. And then at the bottom here, you've got swap channels left and right. So left and right is exactly as it was recorded. We normally record things in audience perspective, so as you're looking at the musician as they would be performing towards you. But if you wanted to switch it around, so what's happening in the right speaker is suddenly happening in the left and vice versa, you can do that just to make it easy to mix in with other libraries that you might have, or other sounds that you're recording. Then the reverb, and we've created a list of 8 kind of like go-to reverbs here. You've got some really small ones at the front end. So Fireside is like a really tight, warm room reverb for those kind of sounds. And then you've got some classic kind of like spring reverbs and plate reverbs. And then our kind of like default to the studio and the hall sounds, which will sound pretty good on absolutely anything really. And then we've got some more spacey ones at the end. Horizon is a 10-second reverb, a bit dark and a bit warm. And then Eclipse is a much more brighter and a longer reverb. That's 20 seconds, that one. So if you really wanted to make simple sounds into something much more expansive, then that's really good for that. So that's the effects page. Now on the settings page, you've got some of these workflow options that you've all been asking for. So on and off key switches, you've got key switches down here for all of the different articulations. So the red switches you'll see will change those sounds. And if you choose 2 of them really quickly on your DAW, so if say you're using your DAW for key switching, if you choose them really quickly and they're on exactly the same point, it will choose both of them. If you just wanted to choose between one and then the other, then you hit one and then hit another one slightly later and it will happen. But if you program both of them at the same time, then both of them will get selected. If that's a good tip to use. If you didn't want the key switches at all because they're clashing with other MIDI information or whatever, you can just turn them off altogether. Or if you wanted to move them, then you can just drag this slider around and you can move your key switches any way you want to on the piano. You can use these arrows just to move them up and down, singles, semitones at a time, or you hit the middle one and then it'll just reset it back to where we've got it to as well. Auto-purge microphones is a really great feature. On here you've got 2 options, on and off, and basically if you drag a slider all the way down to the bottom, it will automatically turn off. If you drag it again, it will turn it back on again, And with that power switch is obviously the purging option that I was talking about earlier. But if you don't like that behavior, then you can just turn it off. And now when you drag a slider down to the bottom, it's going to keep the channel live and open, but you're not going to hear anything. So up to you how you want to work with that. Keyboard sensitivity, linear is basically everything's mapped out exactly as it was. Low sensitivity is for if you just want to access lower sound. So think about these as low sensitivity is if you want to be able to reach lower velocities easier. High sensitivity is if you want to be able to reach higher velocities easier. So if you're playing something that's loud all the time, then maybe choose a velocity sensitivity that's higher, and it will make it easier for you to play those louder velocities on your keyboard. But the default is linear. And then onto this purge unused articulations feature. So this is the number one feature that we've had requested, is basically to be able to say you've got a huge DAW template that you've created and you're really running low on system resources, you've got not much RAM left, and you're kind of going, where can I save some of this from? Say you've only got one of these things loaded up. In the background, everything's loaded up. You've got almost 500 megabytes loaded up there. But you only want to use this one, you don't want any of these others. What you can do, hit this, hit purge now, and it's going to take away all those other samples and take it down to 150 megabytes. So you've saved loads and loads of RAM there. It's going to turn off all of these other articulations as well, so you can see that they're kind of grayed out. If you want them again, just hit one of them and it will load everything back up again and you're back to square one, and you can just choose what you want. If you've got a couple of them or 2 or 3 loaded, I've got those 3, I don't want any of those others, go to your settings page, hit purge now, it's taking it right down to 74 megabytes. So you've saved an absolute load in RAM there. And it's really, really good for, like I say, when you've got those big projects that are all of a sudden it's pushing how much memory your laptop's got. I know, you know, all these new computers can handle loads more tracks these days, but I've often found myself in a point where I'm like, I need to save something somewhere, where can I do it? That's what this feature is all about. Really, really simple to use. You don't have to think about it too much. If you've got one of these articulations selected, you know you're not going to need any of the others. You are at that point where you're mixing your track and you just need to free up system resources. Just go purge now and it will get rid of those options. Absolutely brilliant. Onto the last page, which is info, which is one of the least exciting, but nevertheless, we've got the version number at the top, 1.0. If you just want to check if there has been an update, you can check exactly which version that you're working on. And then this list of credits down below. My name's at the top, but it probably should be at the bottom. All these other people are way more talented and have done a lot more to make this library sound and work as good as it does. So yes, maximum respect to all of those people up there. Thanks very much for all of your help. That's it for the framework. If there's things I've missed or you want to see, or like you've got questions about it, obviously just drop us a line and we'll get back to you. What I want to say is that the framework is there to kind of like still be developed on. So yes, we've been working really, really hard over the last year to get it to this point. But if there's stuff that you're still like, oh, it'd be great to see that, or, you know, it would be nice if this worked like this way, we do take on board comments, and we are happy to kind of like, you know, put those into future libraries or put those into updates and things if they're possible. If it's something that a lot of people request, then that's exactly the kind of thing we want to do, is make stuff that is for you, basically. So yeah, that is the idea behind the framework. Is it's something that can handle absolutely everything, but something that's still going to adapt and evolve over time with your suggestions and your input. That's it. Thanks very much for watching, and we'll see you on the next one. Take care.